Welcome back to the MeasurePod. This is episode 113, and we have a special guest today, János, who is from Funnel, that's going to be talking to us all about MMM, MTAs, and measurement, marketing measurement as a whole. I'm Daniel Perry-Reed. I'm a principal analytics consultant at Measurelab, and as of course always, I'm joined by Bhav Patel, who's director of analytics and experimentation at Lean-Convert. Whoa, that's over with, Bhav. We've just come off this and we both lost complete track of time. And I think we ran pretty long on this one. So apologies. Let's see what the actual final time is when we edit it down. What's your thoughts?
I'll try and keep this brief just because it was a slightly longer episode, and for the first time in a long time, I actually lost track of time. I think it was a really interesting episode because we don't typically go into the amount of depth we went into in this episode with many of the talks that we've had. So it was actually kind of refreshing to be really going in depth. And if anyone's listening who doesn't maybe come with the same sort of like background in MMMs and MTAs and all these type of things, I would say just bear with it. We do try our best to explain certain concepts in a way that hopefully is not patronizing, but allows you to follow the conversation from start to finish with some really good. I think Janos provided some really good insights and takeaways that you could apply or at least bring to the table in your own organization. So I think it was a very practical episode, which we don't always do the most practical ones. Sometimes they're just us being contentious.
Yeah, or me trying to find something out for my own personal gain. So there's that.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
So, okay, perfect. Well, let's jump in. Is there anything you want to plug or mention, Bhav, before we jump in?
No, it's Christmas or coming up to Christmas. I'm not sure when we're going to release this episode, but I hope everyone has a nice break. Take some time off, do some reading, spend time with your families, and just be present. I guess that's my Christmas message.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, that's the completely makes my plug look really rubbish. But I was going to plug another podcast and another resource that's all about work and analytics. So, of course, I echo the sentiment. I think everyone have a great holiday, festive period, Xmas, whatever you celebrate. But I do want to plug something, and of course, links will be in the show notes. But if anyone is interested in MMM and wants to go deeper and enjoys podcasts, as you're here listening to us now, there's a great podcast called the Measure Up Podcast by Jim and co, and they have guests on talking about MMM in more detail. And there's also a Slack community called MMM Hub, which they also run. So I've got links in the show notes. Check them out. They're good episodes. I love listening to them talk about this kind of stuff. All right, enough of us yabbering on with the show. Enjoy your holiday period. Today we have János joining us from Funnel, and I've actually been looking forward to this episode for a good couple of weeks now. So János, we had the opportunity to meet up a couple of weeks ago at an event that you held in London. But before I start bombarding you with questions about media mix modeling, attribution, and everything else in between, why don't we do a quick little origin story? Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us how you came to be here, how you got into this industry, and what it is you do now.
Yes, I'd love to. And thanks so much for the invitation. Really looking forward to the session. So, my name is János Moldvay. I was previously the CEO and co-founder of Atriba, a measurement company that we built for the last 10 years. So we founded it in 2015, and that eventually got merged with Funnel in 2000. Well, this year, basically in June. It seems like almost more than a year ago, or more than half a year ago. So my background story is I studied computer science, was always really interested in analytics and numbers, decided not to go into typical software development and software engineering, was more interested into using business analytics, BI, and data science. Back then it was more called data mining to really sort of create valuable nuggets or insights that really can drive business value. So, for example, to figure out which customer segments one should target, things like that. So I started my first job at a rather large e-commerce group here in Germany, the Otto Group, where we basically used machine learning models to predict which client would buy if we sell them a catalog. That was it. But that was in, when was that? 2005. So we used machine learning, AI, so to say, already back then. And I found that area really interesting. We used also the recommendation algorithms of Amazon to kind of predict which clients we should show which products. And then essentially I went to a business social network called Xing, which was the biggest competitor to LinkedIn in Germany. And there we had a lot of really interesting data, as you can imagine, about all the members of that network. We did a lot of interesting analytics. So, for example, running Google's PageRank algorithm on the network to figure out which is the most influential member of that particular business network. I did an MBA in 2010 in Cape Town, South Africa, a lot of kiting. Just by accident was also the Football World Cup. And I remember Germany beating Argentina 4-0. So that was quite nice to watch live. But in essence, at some stage, I had to get back into real life, so to say. And I went back to Germany, started at an agency. And that's in 2011 where I got in touch with the topic of attribution modeling, customer journey analytics. And I found it really fascinating how in the online marketing world, how much data was available. So all the ad server log files and GDPR and cookie tracking restrictions were in the thing back then. So we had a lot of amazing, valuable data and a lot of questions that needed to be solved and answered. For example, how much value, which campaign, which marketing touchpoint generated. And that's basically where I got in touch with the topic of attribution modeling. And so typically, like an agency, back then, at least at that particular agency, we already sold the attribution modeling customer journey analytics project before I even started at that company. And so we had to figure out a way on how to actually deliver on that. So what we did is we thought through different ways. And I remember exactly laying awake at night and thinking, how can we solve for this attribution? We could actually maybe use the coefficients or something like that from a regression analysis to figure out, if we had the converting and non-converting journeys. And then really that's kind of where this idea started off. And I mean, obviously there were a lot of other vendors and companies at that same time that already had, solutions for that or were thinking about the same things. Yeah, and then in long story short, in 2015, I decided with my co-founder to build a company in that space. We were very much focusing on multi-touch attribution. MMM back then was still a thing that nobody really took too serious. It was the thing that the big FMCGs did in the 1980s, but that always lacked the rich data foundation that MTA had, right? Because we have to keep in mind multi-touch attribution and tracking consists of millions of data points, whereas MMM is oftentimes very much reduced to a very small data set. Yeah, that's basically the story, the origin story. And then there was, as you maybe can imagine, quite a few interesting years with GDPR coming up in 2018 and all the tracking restrictions. I remember Google, we had quite good contact with Google sitting in our office and telling us, guys, actually we're launching a free-for-all tool that's basically doing what you guys are doing. So we thought numerous times that it's game over for us, but we survived and fought our way through and essentially at some stage ended up at a stage where we think we have a good answer for the questions that marketing managers nowadays have.
Wow. I like that. I like how the last 10 years were completely sped through in the whole kind of MMM process and then the acquisitions of Funnel and stuff. We'll dig into that, I'm sure, later on. But I just want to kind of say that I completely understand. I started my analytics journey working for a dedicated attribution platform with our own tag manager software. And Google started kind of giving out their versions for free and completely destroying our business we had. And then GDPR was the final nail in the coffin. So it's a very similar kind of journey, like thinking about that kind of process from data from attribution modeling when you had everything, and then moving to we still called it econometric modeling back then, but the rebrand to MMM, I suppose that was something that is coming back. But yeah, and also Google releasing kind of like basic attribution modeling and stuff like that for free, kind of like underpinned a lot of the move and the shift around. So I just wanted to say, yeah, I get it. It's an interesting world, and it's always changing, right? Whether the old things come back into favor or whether things like GDPR kind of like turn upside down the things that we're able to do.
And maybe to add to that, because back then when GDPR came up and we kind of started to understand the implications of that, is we really thought this is a huge disadvantage for European tech businesses, and in essence, and I think it was actually quite. If you look at it from a what kind of perspective this brought in, it helped a lot of marketing managers realize maybe they shouldn't just only look at clicks and trackable marketing interactions as the way to understand how marketing effectiveness evolves, but rather understand that there are other marketing activities and prospecting, branding that cannot be sensibly evaluated and tracked through tracking systems. so to say. So in hindsight, I think it was good for us, because now we also realize when we look at US-based competitors that they might have started thinking about this a bit later. Maybe that's also an advantage to some degree, but because they have the green field. But we still, when we looked into that in around 2018, and then decided to also look into econometric modeling and time series analysis, our machine learning engineers were frustrated. They were like, this is nonsense. Like, looking at only this few data points, you can make out of it whatever you want to. If you have a CMO telling you need to build an MMM that tells you that TV needs to look great, no problem. Every one of us would have been capable of doing so. So that's kind of the issue that that we saw back then.
Janos, I have to ask, like, what are the other factors that people should be considering in that case? Because you mentioned obviously clicks is just one of them, but I think for most people working in the marketing space, they probably don't know like what other signals they could be looking at, and I think this is as much an education piece as it is, like moving the industry forward. I think first people need to have a baseline understanding of what their options are before they start to think about what they do with them. So I'd love to hear, like, and I'm sure our listeners would love to hear, like, what other things they, the average Joe marketing person could be using to help them understand.
Yeah, great question. Because I think that's also one of the challenges that we see when we talk to brands, is that they are so used to this, let's call it the Google Analytics world of marketing performance evaluation, that they don't even kind of see that there might be other ways and opportunities to look into other marketing activities. And I mean, through this methodology that we just kind of started describing, econometric modeling or MMM, what you are able to is basically include every sort of potential effect. And I'm not just talking about marketing activities, but also other sort of factors that increase your bottom or top line as a business, such as, for example, weather or macroeconomic situation, specific events happening in the world, the changes in Syria, or wars around the world happening. So these can all be to some degree integrated into such a modeling approach, because what you essentially only need is some sort of indication on which day, to what degree this this event happened, or to make it a slightly more practical example, for example, for TV or offline marketing channels, billboard advertising, what you essentially just need is the daily spend or the weekly spend on that particular activity, to understand whether to start analyzing if that somehow correlates to your sales or to your conversion event of interest, if that makes
I
sense.
think I think for things like that, you're absolutely right. Like, it's fairly easy to implement a quantifiable metric into some type of model. You use the example weather is something that we can track on a daily basis. Spend on offline channels, again, something we can track and contribute. If you're starting to think about sort of like more world events, how do you build the that into a model? Because it's not a nice easy like number that you can just put in that goes into a regression model that you can then use to calculate this. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to give away the trades of the secrets of like how
No, no,
Funnel
no,
does
it's
it,
not.
but
It's not.
I'm sure people would love to hear it.
I think, and that very much depends on the particular use cases. But let's just assume we work with a shipping company, and we would want to do MMM for them. So they might be impacted by the war in the in the sort of Near East region, and the difficulties that they cannot potentially ship their containers through the Suez Channel. Adding to that, the pirates activity and all the difficulties that come through that. So they need to ship it around the Horn of Africa, so Cape Town, basically. And that comes with, and the way they are able to quantify that is that just the costs are getting much higher. And that's not due to some supply well, you could see it as a supply chain issue, but that's something where they can give us a sort of price index, which is of course caused by the war happening there. But it's not something that it's just a 0 or 1 in a field called is there a war in Gaza or Ukraine. I mean, you could even do with potential some events, you could go about it like that. For example, if you want to have things such as the sport event, Olympic Games in the summer included. How are you going to quantify that? So you have to think about that, and that it could be just in a way that you use, some sort of binary indicator before you have nothing in there. But it's always better to, find for something that's more closely related, such as a proxy that's more closely related to the actual business case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I'm keen to not have to do lots of definitions in the show notes for this episode. So how about we just pull back very quickly and talk about like what is when we talk about attribution modeling and when we talk about MMM, what are those things and why as marketers or marketing analysts or general data people should we care about these things and what is the differences?
That is a great question, Dan. I think that's probably one of my favorite questions you've ever asked. Like, why should we care about this?
Why should we even care? Like I had I don't know if you know him, Ben Dutter from Power Analytics. I think he's pretty awesome. We had him on our podcast once, and he said, "Actually, I don't give a f about attribution. I think it's just a tool that needs to get the job done." And that's how we probably should think about it much more, instead of seeing it as a means in itself, so to say. Rather understand that it needs to fulfill a business value, and the way it can do it is very plainly and simply speaking, it can tell you which channels you should not invest in because you're losing money on them or they're just not performing to whatever ROAS or CPA levels you set, and which other channels you should maybe invest more money into to grow your business. So that's essentially what this like. It's a fairly simple. You can think of it as the marketing manager with a budget, being an investment manager, and thinking of having to manage a portfolio of potential stocks. The stocks being the channels that he can then invest in, and then having to that's a very simplistic sort of translation into this world, but then having to decide which stocks to buy or which channels to invest in and which channels to de-invest from. That's essentially what measurement should solve for. And then like going into the details, what's the difference between attribution modeling, attribution, marketing measurement, marketing mix modeling, and maybe even things such as incrementality testing. So the attribution modelings came up through this, Google Analytics world where we had last click, but suddenly we also had something such as first click. And for those of you who remember, there was also in Google Analytics linear attribution, time decay, like all these other static attribution models that you could set. I think that's where the term attribution model came from. So basically saying, okay, if I have a conversion, how do I attribute this conversion or this revenue to the different marketing touch points that I could track in that journey? So that's I wasn't part when that term was defined. I just used it then when when I learned about it, or from when I learned about it. So and you could argue that marketing mix modeling is also solving for the attribution problem, right? Because we are not distributing one particular conversion of revenue that has happened to the participating marketing touchpoints, but we're attributing overall for 1 month, for 1 day, we're attributing the sales, the conversions happening to the different marketing channels that a marketing manager drives. And the big difference between attribution modeling and multi-touch attribution, which is more or less the same, but as the term says, if you think of attribution modeling, last click can be is an attribution model as well, similar to first click. So it's just based on one touch point, either the first or last. So multi-touch attribution means that you're looking at all the touch points that have happened, the trackable touch points, so mostly clicks. So that's multi-touch attribution. And then data-driven multi-touch attribution, to make things even more complicated, is when you try to attribute the value based on data-driven algorithms or data-driven, in this case, machine learning algorithms. So that you, for example, in our case, we have converting user journeys and non-converting journeys. And then we try to learn with the help of machine learning algorithms which marketing touch point delivered how much value. So you can think of it as understanding the conversion rate of marketing interactions or marketing touch points. And for calculating conversion rates, you obviously don't only need the converting journeys, but you also need the non-converting touch points. So similar, if you want to evaluate, and I've talked about this example, I think literally 1,000 times in the past couple, or in the last decade, so to say. I mean, if you think of it as a football player, European football, the real football, If you
Thank you for clarifying.
sorry for being that.
Just in case any of our American friends are listening.
Yeah, of course we can also talk about quarterbacks, but I mean, of course, quarterbacks, like if they have missed pass, you wouldn't evaluate a quarterback solely on the successful passes that he played, but also accounting for all the missed passes that he played. So this ratio, this conversion rate is important, right? And same for a midfield player in real football. You wouldn't only look at them from the perspective of how many successful, awesome passes he played, but maybe also how many missed passes that might have led to counter-strike, for example, and a goal received, so to say. So that's the idea behind data-driven multi-touch attribution, and there are many different algorithms that can be used. Markov chain, Markov chains analysis, Shapely are some of the more common ones. You can apply logistic regression. What we do is we use a particular type of deep learning algorithm called long short-term memory network, which automatically accounts for the sort of sequence information. So these short-term memory networks come from Google. Google has used them for language translation at some point, because language is also just a sequence of words and then hence also letters. So you want to understand the sequence, because it makes a difference if you have your Google touchpoint first or your Facebook touchpoint first in a journey where you have both touchpoints included. So that's the explanation about attribution modeling, multi-touch attribution. And then, in essence, the big difference, or the big challenge, so to say, with that is that it's based on tracking data. And as we've just discussed, GDPR and then all the tracking restrictions that came along, primarily driven by Apple through ITP and the iOS updates that they have driven, is that these things were heavily impacted, and then also some businesses even decided to completely not do multi-touch attribution anymore and go all in on marketing mix modeling. And the big advantage of marketing mix modeling is that you don't need user level data. You can do marketing mix modeling, marketing evaluation with fully GDPR compliant without having to use any PII or GDPR relevant data.
So, I mean, I suppose that brings up the obvious next question is, why do people still use multi-touch attribution, and why is not everyone just doing MMM, and have we not moved on with the technology? If that has flaws and this kind of addresses those, like there must be like the other side of the coin. What's the cons with the MMM that multi-touch attribution is essentially solving for those?
Yeah, exactly. Great question, because that's what everybody thinks once we tell the story on how MMM solves all these privacy issues. And additionally, huge advantage, you can also include offline marketing activities, things that you cannot track through tracking system, and you can include non-marketing effects for really understanding incrementality, because that's what we in the game for, right? We want to drive incremental impact and not just our branded search campaigns that or retargeting or discount affiliate campaigns that might not drive actual incremental impact. So why wouldn't we go all? So and literally, we as the Atriba company, so that the company that got acquired by Funnel, we had a situation where we thought, okay, should we just pivot into MMM like fully? And which would have made sense, right? Also to our investors, I think they would have completely bought it and could have, I don't know, probably raised another internal round or financing round. But we thought, well, we understood a bit about the amount of data that you would have in MMM, because we come from a machine learning background, and as I said, our machine learning engineers were not very positive in terms of the amount of data that we have with MMM. And they were very skeptical if this could even work out. So our first experiments were rather surprisingly positive, so that the models were sort of robust. But the more we kind of dove into MMM and the more we found out about MMM, we also saw that MMMs can fly around all over the place. Meaning, you can have three good MMMs in terms of statistical KPIs. So great, low MAPE and high R-square or whatever kind of KPIs you're using on the holdout sample, for example, with regards to MAPE, but essentially giving you different and contradicting recommendations in terms of, this model tells me to invest more into TikTok, and this other model tells me to invest less into TikTok. And that's, if you talk to other MMM practitioners, they might not tell you this on record, so to say, but that's something that a lot of MMM practitioners will also tell you, and that's why, again, short summary here. That's why we need other ways to sort of make sure that MMMs are being calibrated, validated, however you want to call it, but in a sense made more robust. You shouldn't only count on MMM, at least not if you also want to, as we as a software as a service business, do it in some sort of self-service capacity.
I mean, it still kind of ties back to what we were talking about. So not so much why should we care, but now kind of like we've got all of these models to choose from, all these different platforms that do different things. And if you're in the marketing team, which model do you listen to? Which model do you use? Because you have your last click, which everyone is comfortable with. They understand how it works. And it says that for this channel, this is the CPA or this is the RO or something like that. Then you get a little bit quote unquote sophisticated and you start doing first click or some type of decay model or even some evenly distributed version of your attribution model, and that tells you something else. And then you kind of introduce these more advanced methods where you're looking at the MAPE or the R squared value, and it's moving away from session or click based model to a more holistic model, and that tells you something maybe slightly different to what your last, because most people will still be able to do some type of like comparison. What do you listen to? Like, what are people going to listen to? What's going to work best? I know you're probably going to say the one that funnel uses, but let's say you're going to be objective in this instance.
No, yeah, I mean, obviously the one that funnel uses. And,
there you go. There's the soundbite. There's the soundbite.
No. So I mean, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we see still. So when we started 10 years ago, our main, how should I put it, like challenge was to convince people not to do last click anymore. So because we try to come up with football analogies all the time, specifically being a German company. So we started in 2015, 2014, we won the World Cup. So we said, and I don't know of who of you remembers it, but there was one player who scored the final goal against Argentina, Mario Götze. And we always said in the pitch, Mario Götze won the World Cup for Germany, right? He was the only, he could have done it alone, right? And then I was like, what the heck are you talking about? And then we said, look, this is what you're doing with last click. It's complete rubbish. It's like, and Tim, our chief data scientist back then, no, he's now with Funnel as well, but he always said, last click is like McDonald's. It's crap. You shouldn't go there, but it's there. And everybody goes there now and then, and so it's somehow a standard that everybody's kind of grown up with. And the thing is that it still holds some sort of information, right? You kind of know, but is it the only information you should look at when driving your whole marketing budget decision making? Probably not, right? And it's still also just a model on how your marketing, like everything we talk about today, all the different like MMM testing, whatever, are all models to arrive at some sort of understanding of reality, right? And then the question is, how wrong are these models? Even the most sophisticated MMM with whatever algorithms, Bayesian frequentist combination, I don't care. They are all just models, and similarly to last click, first click, time decay, they might be more useful than not. But I think what's important is to understand the limitations, and that we as the sort of marketing community need to talk about these limitations very, very openly. And not pretend as if any of these approaches is the holy grail. And of course, I truly believe that it's better to do MMM and do data-driven multi-touch attribution and look at things as statistical KPIs than solely doing last click. That's true. But truth to be told, in our funnel measurement dashboard, we also show a KPI called last click, just for reference. So we're not saying we're not kind of patronizing marketing managers to say, you are forbidden to look at last click. It's you shouldn't do this. That's not what we're doing, of course. But we just want to make sure that people understand the limitations of that.
I have to only because you use the McDonald's analogy, which I really like, by the way, and I really like the Mario Götze analogy as well, because I think I completely get it. There's an analogy that was said by Avinash Kaushik many years ago. You'll probably be familiar with it. He said attribution modeling is a bit like thanking your first girlfriend for your current wife.
Yeah.
right?
Well, it's
And
the same. Maybe, you know, you could do so, but yes.
but I guess it comes down to, and I get what he's trying to say here, right? I don't think it's an absolute. Just like the Mario Götze analogy is not an absolute. In some instances, there is a argument that actually, you know what, the sales funnel or the sales process or the sales cycle is so short that you don't need to look back like first click, like offline act. It just, the purchase, the path to purchase is so short. In other instances, where let's say you're buying a car, you need to look at econometric modeling and multi-touch attribution and all those type of things where the purchase consideration cycle is significantly higher. So do you think, and it's a bit of a loaded question, do you think this approach is for everyone?
If you set up the Google BigQuery export from Google Analytics 4 and you're not really sure what to do with it, it's your first time using the GCP, then give us a shout. We're here to help. We're GCP certified, GMP certified, and of course, I can't stop talking about Google Analytics 4. So we're here to help you make the most out of that data and show you exactly how powerful it can be. The world of cloud databases and the Google Cloud Platform can be complex and overwhelming at times, but ultimately it's there to serve a purpose and to make the most out of the data you have. You can reach out to us by scanning this QR code, or you can click the link in the show notes to find out more, or you can just head over to measurelab.co.uk and find out a bit more of what we're about.
Good question. I mean, I just have to mention, I think Avinash, and I really admire him. I read a lot of his blog posts, but I think that was when he was still employed by Google, right? So, and you have to think of who profited most from last click back then. So, no, but in all honesty, I think there's some truth to that. So, of course, like businesses that are just starting up and are, maybe below 10 million in revenue, yearly revenue, maybe it's not the most important thing to look at it, but they still should understand the limitations of that. So, I mean, we've grown up with businesses that came from the performance marketing world. So Flixbus is a really good example of that. I don't know if you know them, but the owner of Greyhound Bus in the US. So they want to be the worldwide leading bus coaching service, so to say. And they started off as being the best performance marketing managers or one of the best performance marketing managers and really excelling in performance marketing, Google Ads, etc. But then at some stage they realized, and I think for that you could have even argued that last click is not the worst, type of decision making. Rather, look at last click in Google Analytics and see also other clicks from other ad platforms than just looking into Google Ads, where you wouldn't even see Facebook clicks, for example, right? So, I mean, last click is still better than looking into each ad platform in isolation. If you do, for example, last click analysis in Google Analytics, you could argue. So I think, yeah, for that case might make sense. But if you, as soon as you start driving upper funnel type of campaigns, and I'm not even talking about, offline, maybe just like meta prospecting campaigns. Well, first, they're usually not the last click in your journey, and maybe they are not even a click. So, prospecting branding campaigns in social media, usually the main effect is not coming through clicks and visits on your website directly from that ad, but through sort of a branding type of impact. And that's where you need other type of approaches. So I wouldn't say this is for everyone. And of course, we need to look into each business in a more differentiated way. And also, I wouldn't say last click is rubbish for everyone.
So the key question here is going to be, and actually for those few people that were at the event the other week in London that me and Janos were at, I asked you the same question. There is, I suppose, like when we talk about having different methodologies of measuring our marketing, it feels like we're solving one problem at a time, and there's a different perspective because you go to Google Analytics last click, that's going to be different to the Google Ads last click, which is different to the TikTok last click, and then your Facebook and your email. And then you've got, what we're saying here is we've got MMM that will solve it slightly differently. Essentially, we're adding more in without removing stuff. So we've got this kind of like debt, this kind of like overhead that we're kind of adding in, which makes deciding what to do. If you're that marketing manager, using your stock analogies of like, where do I move my money to maximize revenue? it makes it even harder because you're having contradictory opinions and you're adding more opinions, more chefs into the kitchen, which is my favorite analogy here. So how do you solve for that? Because you could argue that I could find a model that proves my point, right? Let's say I'm the paid search manager, and I'm like, well, I'm going to pick a model that makes mine look great, and I'm going to tell my CMO that I need more budget because look at my numbers. And then everyone's doing the same. So how is that kind of addressed or solved, or at least from your experience, like how do you mitigate everyone just finding the answer they want?
Really great question. I forgot to address this one point that you also mentioned. Like what we see a lot is businesses working with MTA, maybe Google Analytics on the one side, and then even having some MMM practice. Either they've worked with Robin, they have capable data scientists doing that, or they're working with a MMM only solution. So that also happens, and then you have contradicting results all the time, and that's similar challenge, right? Because you have two systems telling you different things. Most of the times in these cases, it's like completely different departments working on different KPIs, which also is not great, right? Because it's one might be the branding department, the media department, the other one is the digital performance marketing channel department, so to say. So how do you consolidate? And I mean, we have a very specific view on that, but I don't know if you read this Google's playbook on what's it called? Playbook on measurement, something like that. I forgot the exact title, but it's a well worth read. And basically, they make the point and that you need to combine these methodologies and that you shouldn't look at to each one of these in isolation. And nowadays it goes by the name of triangulation, and we as Funnel obviously are very much guilty of putting that term out there as well and promoting it. But the idea is basically that you not look at any of these methodologies, MMM, MTA, incrementality testing, in-platform attribution results in isolation, and combine them in a way that you have one number per channel, and not like, as you said, your last click numbers, your MMM numbers, your in-platform numbers, but one number that, as a solution, for example, we recommend you should look into. And that's similar to, it's kind of developing into this, not best practice, because it's, again, might not be the best solution for everyone, and depending on the measurement sophistication and maturity, but it's kind of coming up there as the way to go, so that you combine different approaches to arrive at at one KPI per channel.
I did a piece of analysis not too long ago where I was comparing the different attribution models against each other. So I had the last click, the first click, DDA, Facebook's, and the platform that they were using was called Phosphor, and their attribution model. And so I was actually comparing it, and I arrived at a similar conclusion. And you say it's not for everyone. I think it is for everyone in many cases, actually, because you're always going to get bias from the marketing person who's on the PPC channel, the platform that you're using. The only way to overcome that bias, and I normally hate saying more data is better, but in this case, more data is better. By having access to all of the attribution models per channel and the breakdown of them, and having a look at sort of like a aggregated view of all of these channels, will give you kind of a wisdom of the crowd approach to marketing spend optimization that will ensure that you are not not wasting. There's always going to be some level of like wastage in your bucket, but you're minimizing the waste I get. Because the challenge with and I think with the everyday marketing person, they're never going to understand the concepts of like mean absolute percentage errors, right? Like that's MAPE, by the way, for those who are wondering what MAPE is, or R squared, which hopefully more people are more familiar with. They're not going to understand these concepts. So to be able to build this themselves is going to be a little bit harder. It's going to be a little bit trickier. So the best way is to like take whatever data points you have and create some type of aggregated view, which will allow you to remove bias and give, I believe, a more fairer view of the world. Because that's what we're really trying to do here. We're trying to understand the world as accurately as possible. We're never going to get to 100% accurate. So what do we try to do? And it's as you said, we try to minimize those errors. So I think it's a great point.
No, but exactly. I think you're completely right on that. It's I mean, truth, like the truth that or what we see a lot is that there are some businesses out there that maybe are not best suited to do MMM because, for example, they only do Google Ads, right? You don't have the biggest MMM challenge if you just starting to grow with Google Ads, but you still need to be kind of understanding as soon as you want to invest into upper funnel type of activities, you should look into something else than last click. That's what I kind of meant. But you're right that, I mean, the brands that we talk to, they have these challenges, like, different perspectives, different teams looking at different numbers all the time. And we tell them, look, there's a consolidated way and a better way to do this. I mean, again, trying to mitigate the disadvantage that you have with each methodology, and leverage the advantages that you have. So, for example, for MTA, as we discussed, like, it's very much reduced and focused on the lower part of the marketing funnel, right? You cannot sensibly measure like a TV campaign or an out-of-home campaign with MTA. That, like, usually, like, there's not a good way to do that. And on the other hand, with MMM, again, it's like based on a very limited amount of data, so it can be very volatile if you're not doing it right. And then with incrementality testing, which is the way to try to prove causality, meaning and then nowadays how incrementality testing is usually done, you have one region in let's say, for example, Germany, you choose Bavaria and say all the people in Bavaria are being exposed to your marketing activity, out of home campaigns, for example, and the ones in Baden-Württemberg, another region or another state in Germany, is not exposed. And then you compare the difference, so to say, as a test and control group, just as a quick explanation there. So that's great, because that gives you a very sort of more causal understanding of the impact of your marketing activities. But it takes a lot of time. Like, it's nothing that you do the test now and then in an hour you have the results. It usually runs for days and weeks, right? So that's another disadvantage of incrementality testing. But on the other hand, it gives you probably the most causal understanding of the impact and the incremental impact of specific marketing activities.
Do you think that then is there a use for these multiple different perspectives? I always consider these different measurement techniques as like lenses you apply on the data, right? They just tell you different stories, and collectively you can make up the narrative and join the dots between them, right? But I'm just thinking about this, like, they're not real time, as you said. Like, sometimes they take weeks to run with incrementality tests. Sometimes they need weeks, years, days to process for the MMMs. Attribution is, got its flaws and limitations, but can be a bit more quick and reactive. The actual marketing tools themselves, let's take things like Google Ads, they're not going to plug into our MMM capabilities to then optimize the ads on a real-time basis. And so they're going to continue to run with their own modeling capabilities, their own ways, perspectives. The same could be said for TikTok, and the same can be said for all of our other different marketing channels. So, like, where does this come in? I mean, we talked about adjusting budgets, and from the kind of CMO's perspective of kind of shifting the spend on a retroactive historical analysis project. But, like, is there anything beyond this? Like, should people that are, let's say I'm a PPC manager right now, and I'm looking at this, and I know it exists, and I know it's important, I know what to do, but does it actually affect me? Like, how does something like this affect me managing my campaigns and keywords and spend on a daily basis?
Yeah, great question. So I don't know. So if we start at MMM, probably the impact will be more on the manager deciding how much the PPC manager should be allowed to spend overall on PPC, right? So that's kind of, and that's a very specific type of decision that can be driven by MMM. And it can be operationalized in a way that we use MTA results. So as I said, MMM, with the small data problem that it has, you usually shouldn't do MMM on a campaign level, because there's like way too many campaigns, thousands of campaigns, but only like per year you have 365 data points if you do MMM on a daily level. So there's this mismatch between number of input variables and the number of data points that you have. But we can use MTA results or in-platform results to split up the MMM attributed value to PPC, for example, down to campaign level. So for example, if we know multi-touch attribution tells us like generic search campaign A has 30% and generic search campaign B has 70% of the MTA conversions, then we can split up the overall MMM numbers that we allocated to PPC down to these campaigns in that way. So that's a very specific way on how to combine MMM and MTA. And then that information can be used by the PPC manager to say, oh, this campaign overall is not creating that much incremental impact as I thought of. So I'm, maybe reducing budget or, increase the targets on that specific campaign, whatever the specific steering strategy is in that case. one other way, and I always need to be a bit careful to not oversell or not to be too salesy on what we actually do at Funnel Measurement. But one way, and also other vendors do that as well. But one thing we do is we track Google click IDs. So the clicks, the Google click IDs are the clicks, the IDs on clicks that happen on Google ad campaigns. And then we can give value to these particular Google click IDs and export them back into Google Ads, so that the Google bidding algorithm can use this more unbiased evaluation of the specific clicks. That's nothing that the PPC manager is involved in on a daily basis because it's an automated process, but we have 50% of our clients, of the measurement clients, using that for direct optimization of Google Ads campaigns. Like such a much more unbiased way to evaluate their Google ad campaigns, and make sure that it's based on a more holistic view, because you account for other marketing channels effects and make sure that Google isn't being overvalued.
So far, what we've talked about is we've actually gone pleasantly into quite a lot of depth on this topic, which I love. But I'm going to take it sort of like upper level, because I really think that there are going to be people who listen to this podcast and think, yeah, like you guys are absolutely right. Like everything you said so far resonates. But we are not the people who make these decisions. So I want to ask you, Janos, like when you are going out to clients and you're reaching people, how do you convince the marketing person who holds the budget to think about this stuff differently? Because assuming most marketing managers most marketing directors or CMOs, let's assume they've come through the ranks of, I was going to say traditional marketing, but actually it's been sort of like 15 years since Google Ads has been a thing, right? That most people have seen that transformation, but they only know last click or first click, if we're lucky, or maybe some multi-touch or something like that, whatever. How do you convince them to take on sort of like this more sophisticated methods? Because what we're talking about is going quite in depth into like statistics and that kind of like prerequisite knowledge that's required to understand the mechanics of what you do. How do you translate that to a marketing director who only knows last click and first click?
Yeah, good. So we just had a kind of call that was like sales call that was very much related to that situation, where the marketing manager was, so they do significant TV ad campaigns, and he was basically, and truth to be told, most of the times is, I'd say probably 80-90% of the time, the marketing managers are already aware of this challenge, that they know that they shouldn't, like, not that they shouldn't, but that they're probably not fully understanding the impact of the marketing, upper funnel marketing activities. And that could be social prospecting or TV or any other sort of upper funnel activities or branding campaigns, but they might not know about the ways on how to do it. That's more often the situation that we encounter, to be very honest. And that's different to 10 years ago, where we needed the Mario Götze example to get people away from last click. And now marketing managers also, through all the changes, GDPR, tracking restrictions, they kind of understood that. That's what I would, probably want to put out there. So it's not that we need to convince people that they need to understand the impact of the upper funnel activities, because they're already doing it, right? So they somehow doing things right, even though they cannot fully quantify it. I think that's a good message to be put out there. Nobody is just doing Google Ads because that's the only thing that they can measure properly. But then what we start to explain is actually really going into the nitty-gritty of it, trying to explain that what MMM is, how it looks like. We try to explain them how the whole modeling process, because the next thing they ask is, but how do I know this works? And you just not made this thing up. And maybe, I don't know, Dan, you remember this, the other keynote that we had in London there, Andrew, he did an awesome presentation. He said, what was that about MMM? This is fucking made up. That's literally what he said. MMM is, who thinks that's fucking made up? So I hope we allowed to cuss on this. Otherwise, just beat me out there on this F word. But that's what he literally said. So I'm just quoting him. So and that's the thing with MMM and these more seemingly advanced methodologies. You need to get people involved and help them understand it. So I think the short answer is educational efforts that we as vendors and players in the industry need to invest in. And so we really need to we're planning to have some training sessions. I think Google's playbook was awesome to put it out there. The work that you guys are doing with the podcast, these are all things paying into that, because nobody's going to buy a solution in the long run, or invest into an approach that they don't fully understand.
Well, maybe let me phrase it another way. Should we make most CMOs and marketing directors redundant and replace them with scientists? Is because marketing is different now, right? Like there is the creative aspect of marketing, of course, right? But then there is the measurement aspect of marketing, which in itself is a full-time job. Understanding how to spend, where, et cetera, and ensuring that you are senior enough to make those decisions, right? Like let's say you've got a really creative CMO who doesn't understand like diddly shit about MMMs and things like that, and they continue to pump money into some creative campaigns, which are probably doing some type of a job, but actually it needs that kind of numerical mind, for lack of a better word, to be able to translate what you're seeing in raw data and understand the difference between causality and all of these things, correlations, and make these informed decisions. Where should the CMO be replaced with like a chief data officer?
I think it wouldn't sell.
I'm being contentious here on purpose, by the way.
Yeah, no, I think you touch a point there that's very interesting. What we generally see is that marketing managers overall get much more technical and much more quant-like people. So they understand concepts such as ROI, of course, but then also the more machine learning and statistical KPIs. That's something that I see, at least in the last decade, shifting quite dramatically. Replacing the CMO, again, that's the one that's supposed to buy our solution, so I'm not going to confirm that. So that wouldn't sell well. No, but I think like also in that regard, we see CMOs wanting to learn about that and getting more technical and and of course there's this natural fluctuation with CMOs. Some going into their well-deserved sort of how's it called, pension time, and maybe more technical people come up, and maybe if the organization decides who should be the next CMO in the organization, should it be the brand director, or should we maybe use the performance marketing manager who's used to these sort of discussions around modeling, maybe more so. I think that's kind of the way we So, but it's an interesting point, and of course, this all needs to be supported by us as the industry in terms of educational efforts. We cannot just hope for.
I was going to say, I'd love to understand what the decision was happening. I don't know if you've been following the Jaguar ad campaign recently, where they completely, that was a through and through creative brief. But I wonder if there's someone who, the man behind the curtain or the woman behind the curtain, who was like, let's do something outrageous because like numerically this is going to add up, and then I would have loved to have seen
Hey,
who was the brains behind the Jaguar.
How do we go viral? Here you go, you figured it out.
How do we get as many comments hating on us as possible?
Hey, all publicity is good publicity, right?
Yes, exactly.
Janos, I'm sorry to be this person, but I seem to be every episode, but we are running quickly out of time, and I want to respect your time and our time, and I want to kind of get us towards wrapping up towards an end. I wanted to, before we wrap up and start doing, there's a couple of questions I want to throw at you, a bit of a quick fire question, unfairly, because I haven't told you them ahead of time. This is the moment to plug funnel measurement and the tool itself. Is there anything that you want to plug, anything you want to say, any links you want to throw out there that I can put in the show notes?
No, I mean, overall, generally speaking, what was so interesting about this acquisition of Atriba as a measurement company by Funnel Data Hub is that we have been partnering for quite a while, because we knew it when we dove into MMM, when we really explored MMM starting in 2018, also due to GDPR. We thought really quickly about, okay, where do we get all this aggregated data from, the spend data from, in the most efficient way? So we looked at different, data hubs, so to say, and we started partnering with Funnel end of 2019. So before the merger, 80% of our clients were already using Funnel. So it was a very natural combination, and until this day, you probably know the other players out there, such as what's it, Datarama, Adverity, Supermetrics. None of these have an MMM solution or triangulation solution for that matter. So that's, I think, the shameful plug here, that this solution is, I think, quite interesting, because it's not just about the algorithms and machine learning and the whole data science. The even more, almost more important part is the whole data generation integration part, and that's what Funnel Data Hub is so great at. So I think that's again, I think quite an interesting development there, and we like competition, so we are very excited to see what the other players are doing in this space. But the combination is, I think, quite interesting. So go check out our website. There's a lot of amazing content out there. We have a measurement academy out there if you want to test that. We're gonna put a lot of measurement content out there. There's also some beginner tutorials for all of these topics on YouTube that we just recorded, which are very on a high level, so not too much talking about MAPE and R-square and all of these things. Yeah, that's it. And then we'll also gonna have a podcast, and I'll hopefully be able to invite you at some stage, which we're gonna restart in January. Marketing Measurement Matters. There's some episodes on Spotify. Yeah.
And that 95% discount code is
42, of course.
Love it. Well, look, thank you, Janos, for that. So now time for a quick rapid fire wind down section. So 3 questions, and then you're off the hook, and you can get back to whatever we interrupted you doing today. So if you was to give some advice to someone starting out on their marketing measurement journey today, let's say it's a team, an organization, a startup, whatever it be, what would that one piece of advice be?
Go read Google's measurement playbook. I think that's a good start. It's we need more like these standards, and then also feel free to check out our blog on funnel measurement. But for a more unbiased recommendation here, I think that's a good start.
Looking ahead, what do you think will be the biggest shift or trend in the world of MMM and MTAs over the next 5 years?
Over the next 5 years? Ooh. I think MTA and tracking will go through sort of renaissance. People will realize that, some cookies will die, not all of them, of course. There was a big flaw in the thinking there. And that we'll see, renaissance of MTA and tracking becoming more valuable again.
Amazing. Yeah, I haven't heard that. That's really interesting. I'd love to dig into another time. Final question, outside of the world of MMM, MTAs, and measurement, what do you like to do outside of work to wind down, to escape everything?
That's easy. Kite surfing, kiteboarding, wing foiling, everything that's on the water. That's amazing. Like, that's total freedom outside of any thought of algorithms and restrictions, privacy, or tracking related. Water sports, and of course spending as much time as possible with my 3 kids.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Everything you mentioned, I was furiously typing, but I'll add some more in. All the links will be in the show notes, including ways to connect with you. Is LinkedIn the best way to connect with you, Janos, if anyone's listening wants to connect, or is there any other ways they can get in touch?
Yes, definitely. Feel free to connect directly on LinkedIn, either through private message or, also, of course, through Funnel's website, but LinkedIn is fine.
Cool. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Measure Pod. You can subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this on to make sure you never miss an episode. You can also leave us a review if you can on any of these platforms. We're also over on YouTube if you want to see our lovely faces and our lovely guest faces while we do this as well. Make sure to subscribe to the Measurelab channel to make sure you never miss an episode as they come out. If you want to leave us a review, that would be hugely appreciated. You can do that on most of the podcast applications, or there is a form in the show notes. You can leave feedback directly to me and Bhav. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.